Good day, my name is Julian Nimrable, and today for my extemporaneous speech, I will be talking about why Tarzan marked the end of the Disney Renaissance and how it didn't follow the usual Disney formula that the Disney Renaissance films have followed. Now, to understand what made the Disney Renaissance films so memorable, here are the four tropes, according to Adam Balato from FilmSchoolRejects.com, that defined the Renaissance. A mistaken identity, where the protagonist takes on a role that is far different from their original to fulfill a certain purpose, whether for themselves or or they are under a certain condition, or to better themselves or to protect others. The second trope would be a villain who suffers a grisly death, which is usually caused by their own mistake while in the final battle, or are killed by the main protagonist or during the final battle. The third trope would be a sidekick that would support the main character, be their complement and their other half, and would be some sort of moral guide or a mentor throughout their journey and development in the movie. And then the last but not the least, and the most iconic definition or trope given in a Disney Renaissance film would be its soundtrack and its I Want songs that would ground the the main plot and the motivations of the main character throughout the movie. Now, let us go to the final film in the Disney Renaissance collection, Tarzan. Tarzan 1999 was directed by Kevin Lima and Chris Buck and was the first adaptation of the Tarzan of the Eight novel series. In retrospect, it is the last film in the Renaissance collection because it introduced new tropes while keeping the four aforementioned tropes but refreshing them into a new style and paving the way for the second Disney Dark Age. Now that we've heard the 4 points that make a Disney Renaissance film so iconic and memorable, let's take those 4 points and compare it to how Tarzan handles and twists and subverses these 4 points. Now, for a mistaken identity, I find this film very similar to Beauty and the Beast, in my opinion, because Tarzan mistakes himself as a gorilla until he is introduced to Jane and learns how to copy her, Clayton, and Archimedes' more human like behavior, akin to how when Beast meets Belle, he starts to adapt and become a little more human like. Except here, there isn't much characterization, and there is a subversive. Now, let's examine another Disney Renaissance trope that was used in this movie. Well, I personally find that the this point holds true because of the final act, but it isn't as impactful because Clayton wasn't as much as an effective villain as the other villains, where they had this one defining trait that makes us remember them. And I like to think that he's just a watered down version of Gaston because he has the same motivations as Gaston. He dies the same way as Gaston. But we don't remember him as much because he doesn't contribute to the plot as much as the other characters or other villains in the predecessor Renaissance films. And the same goes for the sidekick characters. Well, why, yes, the sidekick characters are there to lighten the mood in certain scenes. They're also there to contribute to the plot, to help the main character get some more character development. But the thing is about these two characters, Turk and Tantor, they don't contribute as much and they just come off as these more comedic and snarky characters rather than the heartfelt and supportive ones that we've seen in the predecessor Renaissance film. So it doesn't have the same impact as the last few films. Now let's take a look at the soundtrack, the most defining trait of any Disney Renaissance film. Tarzan's soundtrack takes a different approach to the music, however. The music is produced by Phil Collins. And even though I think his input for the soundtrack was endearing, I I think it still lacks because none of the characters, not even Tarzan, breaks into song. I know it's not necessary to have an I want song, but the suspension of disbelief has already been established because this is animation. And it's alright if a half naked man on a branch started singing about how he wants to be a little bit more human because when you place a Phil Collins song without any of the characters singing it in the background, the scene seems like a music video instead of a Disney movie. Like these are different animated music videos stitched together rather than the usual flow of a Disney Renaissance film where the emotion gets too much and the character suddenly starts singing about what they want rather than it being played in the background. So this decision in the soundtrack ultimately altered the way they did movies and the way they did soundtracks in the next couple of years, as it is evident in movies like Treasure Planet and the modern Disney movies. Although some have lived on to follow the Renaissance format, just like Frozen. In conclusion, despite the critical acclaim and the box office success, Tarzan is still a part and was the end of the Disney Renaissance because it paved the way for new tropes, new archetypes, new storytelling techniques in the next Disney films, and was not as fondly remembered as the other entries. Although it was not the best at delivering what the other films were known to offer, it was still a high grossing hit for the company. It made them a lot of cash, like the other films, and as Michael Eisner, former Disney CEO, said, we have no obligation to make art. We have no obligation to make history. We have no obligation to make a statement. But to make money, it is often not important to make history, art, a statement, or all three. Thank you once again for listening to me and my extemporaneous speech, and I hope you have a good